Hello my friends and welcome back to another video of the Tokyo Drafts. On this video I'm going to share with you my process on creating an architectural collage. It is a very good and fast way to show an abstract architectural idea, and I find that this tool works very well when you have a presentation. It could be for an architectural competition, it could be for a studio presentation, it could be for just practicing and seeing how you want to represent a particular concept. All in all, the way of combining different visuals to interpret and showcase a concept that you have is a very good way to communicate with people that are not familiar with your concept. You can say it is a kind of a first impression, and it's a way for architects to be creative with the mediums that they use. So let me get started over here. This is a competition entry that we submitted together with my team in the beginning of 2022. The competition is named Concentrico. It is a competition that takes place in certain regions of Spain, and it is taking place every year, where the competitors are asked to submit small pavilions that could act as community spaces, ticket information services could be provided, and to give information about the Concentrico exhibition and festival. And let me show you a little bit what was our idea. Our idea is called Human Next Door, and we are commenting on the fact that with social distancing in the post-COVID society, we are becoming more distant, and it is a way to for us to go back into being closer to each other, and that is why we proposed to use local wood and create these arcs that can fit 2 or 3 people and create spaces for proximity. And it basically is working with a grid. The pavilion is inspired by the historical character of the city, rich in charming cathedrals and historical monuments that go back centuries, and we're basically reinterpreting the city's vaulted structures with wood and leave it bare in order for it to become a sign of itself and to shelter underneath it unexpected subjects. And in this collage, the idea was to show different influences that act on the city and shape how the city's culture takes place. And we have the historical character from the buildings from the medieval times and Renaissance. And we also have some newer buildings. We have the main building. It is Centro Ibercaja La Rioja. It's a cultural venue, congress center and library. And after studying a little bit the story of the city, we found that it is a city that has a rich history in wineries, and it is part of local culture, the cultivation of vineyards and the consumption of wine, grapes. It's part of the landscape. And our idea was to, you see these statues here, they are actually part of the plaza of the site, and these statues, they signify the final arrival from a pilgrimage and the arrival of the travelers to their destination. And all these elements, they kind of inspired a collage where we bring together the landscape, from the mountains to the vineyards, to the historical landscape of the city, and to the cultural landscape that Concentrico is trying to create. And also creating this, let's say, distortion of the plaza, that it becomes one with the landscape of the vineyard. And it almost looks as if the statues are walking towards the pavilion. And it is kind of an exaggeration, but is not completely false. They are actually next to the pavilion. But I guess what this collage is doing is it is creating a kind of interplay between the different elements that we researched while we were working on the site. And so now I would like to go through the collage itself after explaining you the idea. So this is the collage right here. So I would like to go over step by step, breaking down the collage, what was my thought process in making it, and by breaking down and showing you all the layers to give you some ideas on how you could create your own collage. So without further ado, I have the collage file here. I don't need this. And I have all the layers that you see here, which I have made invisible so that we can actually see what is the thought process one by one. So when making a collage, what is important is the perception of depth and your own idea about the depth and the layers that comprise the collage. A collage is not a photograph, it is a composition that has many different layers that come together. So when you create such a composition, you need to be intentional as to what is your departure point. So in my case, because I knew I had an idea of making the idea of a landscape upon which would rest the proposal that we made with my team, and somehow to create this distorted perspective that shows the two statues approaching the pavilion. Having that as an idea, I knew that I would need to layer my image in certain ways. I would need to have. So this is how I layered my image. First of all, we have the skyline. We have these different kinds of skylines. We have the mountain, which is layer number 1. We have this historical skyline. I'm using my mouse for this, so excuse me for that. We have this historical skyline, which is number 2. And then we have the vineyard, which is actually layer 3. When I say layer, I mean layer that composes the image. I don't mean Photoshop layer, just to clarify. And then we have the 4th layer, which is these other building elements that bring the plaza closer to the historical part. So you can say that this layer 4 acts as a connector between the plaza and the historical layer, together with creating a sense of distance. So we have these buildings at the far back, and then we have some buildings closer, in order to make this vineyard image feel three-dimensional. Otherwise, it is difficult to perceive this movement from the front towards the back of the image. And that is why I used these 3 elements in this way. And then we have the 5th element, which is, let's say, the idea of this collage, which is this reaching towards the pavilion, which is 5. And then a 6th element would be these statues. And that is how I composed the image in my mind as a sketch before trying to figure out what images look good. And so I will call this layer layers of composition. And another important thing I'd like to share with you has to do with how to initially conceive of the aesthetic of your collage. One thing that I always go back to is establishing a color palette. And the way I do this is after I have researched a little bit on the available materials, I see, for example, that a lot of the historical materials have a sense of pale beige and shades of brown. But then at the same time, we have a sky that we want to create, and we have a vineyard. So in this sense, we can start already imagining a palette. Here I have already intentionally made it look that way, but when you start out by combining different elements, you will see that their colors are disparate and they don't really necessarily fit together as a color palette. So what I always like to do first is I like to find some images where I believe that a good combination of colors is taking place. I found this beautiful layout of architectural drawings, which I will link down below, where I see a very nice combination of gold colors, greens, blues, and a sense of brightness, which I like. So I use this as the inspiration for the color scheme. And at the same time, while I was researching how to create the collage, I was looking into what is the characteristics of the city that the competition is taking place, which is Logrono, or Logronio, I guess. And in most cases, I would find the photos or diagrams of the skyline, which inspired me to look for a skyline of different historical buildings that Logronio is being understood by. From those buildings, you can understand that this is Logronio. And I went out to find these images. So this is an image of Logronio. It is an image of the landscape, of the hilly landscape. It's kind of a valley and it has hills in between, and you can see the vineyard here. So I use that as a base to start understanding how to layer the image. So this distant background, a hill, and then the vineyard. So then I started playing with creating different shapes and seeing what works. And what you see here is actually, I have this mountain, but what happens with this mountain is that this quality is really bad, it's really low. So what I decided to do is to create a very sharp outline and to give a yellow color, which I took from the color scheme image I showed you above, and to recreate a sense of snow by using a brush. So now the outline looks sharp and fine instead of low quality pixelated. So that's why I did that. And then I attempted to tone down the sky a little bit to make it look more like a sky rather than just a yellow by creating a gradient with this color over here. And the reason I use these effects, the hue saturation and the selective color, is to give a palette, so to actually start to neutralize the image, because before that it has a lot of weird grays and purples that I don't like. So I start to play with some adjustment layers to tone the image down a bit, and then I start to incorporate different textures for the mountains. I realized as I was working on this that I was not happy with this outline either, and I looked for more images for a different mountain that I could work with. So basically it's the same image which I have duplicated, and the way that I made this is basically this image of a snowy mountain, which I tried to not make it look so snowy by applying a gradient to tone the color towards the palette of the collage, and to make it darker so that it looks more like a texture of a mountain rather than a very, very snowy mountain. And then I applied a gradient with the green and yellow so that I can go back to the color scheme that I mentioned before. And then I duplicated this group and flipped it, and I started cropping so that I can create a kind of mountain line here. And now is the part where I'm starting to create the layer at the front of the mountain. So this first layer was the further back layer of the collage. And now I'm starting to put together images of historical monuments by cropping them and placing them in some way that I think fits well. What you see in this adjustment selected color layer is basically I'm trying to bring the colors of this image closer to here, a bit more yellow and a bit more bright, to match a little bit more the shadows that these two images have. And this is my second closest to back layer. And then this is my vineyards that I found a very nice image. I looked for a very long time to find an image that has this movement from down to a higher level, to have this idea of ascending to something or a kind of distorted perspective. And I was lucky enough to find this image, which also has a very nice color palette. And then I started to bring the two layers, the historical monuments and the vineyard, closer by implanting some more monuments a bit closer to the observer. And at the middle, I have the cultural center, which is also the part of the site of the competition. And what I have done with this color fill layer, I have basically selected parts of the image that have been very dark, and by applying this light gray I kind of balanced them out and made them lighter. And now I see I have a mistake here, which I'm going to fix. And also I see that the light of this monument over here and this monument is not as bright as this one. So I went ahead and selected these lighter parts of the image and I applied a light gray color on it to balance it even more. This layer is basically a pattern of tiles. I will show you how to do that actually, because it's quite easy to do. I found a pattern of tiles, and the way you can find that is actually very easy. And I try to make sure that the tiles match the actual plaza. And a good way to look for patterns is to always include the word pattern and the word seamless. And you will have all sorts of different patterns. But let's say something like this would work for you. I'm going to try it with this one this time, just to try and show you something different. So let's copy this image and create a new image, which is going to automatically have the proportions of the image that you copied. So you select the image, select pixels, right click, select pixels, and then you go edit, define pattern. And I will name it Plaza. Plaza tiles. And I will delete this layer. I will make a new one to go completely from zero. And I will basically try to follow the vineyard topography as a basis for what I want to do for the plaza. We need a long rectangular shape that represents the plaza surface that we're then going to distort. So we start with a very flat surface that we apply a pattern to, and then we distort this pattern. So I will choose the tile pattern I made, you can eyeball it to make it, for example, this looks like a much smaller surface than what this surface looks in terms of scale. So this would mean a bigger plaza than this. This would be the size of a room. We can go around 30% or 35, let's say. And now that we have created this, I don't like that it's so gray, so I'm going to rasterize it. I'm going to select the pixels and I will apply a levels layer where I will pick the brightest, the white sampler, and I will do something like this. And then I will go back and bring back a little bit of the darker points so that it doesn't look too burnt. And I will rasterize again. And then I will select the image again and go to the marquee tool and go to free transform. And in the free transform setting, you will have some new options. You will have the option of perspective, which we will use first, because we want to set the main principles of how this image is supposed to move. And distort. So basically, I'm bringing the image down here at the base. And I will go again into perspective. You can play with this many times to see what fits you. Okay, this is to be something like this. And then what I will do is I will go into distort. And I will exemplify this even more. And this is already fine. You have already created the kind of sense that there is a surface that goes towards the main building. But if you want to create a more integrated look with the vineyard, I would suggest to try the warp and really push the boundaries of this so that it looks like it blends with the vineyard. It's a perception, it's not like it really blends, but it's the perception that it does. And then I felt that this is strange because it looks like it's being dug inside the vineyard, but actually I would like to kind of have this, the top part, but I would like to somehow hide the base in a way. And then, as I told you before, there is the idea of having the statue approaching the pavilion. So I basically put the image of a statue. So this is the image I used for the statues. Let me copy this image and show you how I made it fit new. Create, Control V, and I'm going to crop this. And the way I do this is I create shapes that mask this, and you can be as detailed as you want. So for example, now the way I'm doing it is not very careful, but you would need to put the fill and remove the stroke. The good thing about the shapes is that you can go back even if you make a mistake and fix it. But when it comes to selecting with the lasso tool, if you make a mistake, you need to select again. So that is why for more complex selections, I like to go with the shape tool by basically going over the shapes, then rasterizing, selecting the pixels and copying. The last part is to put the model. And what I would like to show you is that the way this model comes from Enscape is this very dull and dark outline, this dark profile, but then by creating a color overlay with a brighter color, this brighter color which is selected from this building at hard light and 60% capacity, it kind of changes the whole tone of this and the brightness. And then I basically use other filters that allow me to bring this element closer to the colors and what I want to do with this. I want to make it brighter so that it stands out. Color and contrast, it doesn't pop up pop out the image so much as I'd like to. So these are the elements I have used. And the good thing about the collage is that you don't really need to worry about shadows. It is more like of course, it is an arrangement that I try to make in different layers so that it looks like it has space. But at the same time, it is very forgiving if you choose for certain elements to be flatter and to not have shadows. And this is basically the collage. And then you can choose to go for different things like creating noise or giving some more contrast with the colors. It's a collage, so it allows you to go a bit more crazy with the colors and the contrasts. I added some more yellow to the sky, for example, to make it go closer to the palette that I have mentioned to you before. And this is the collage. There are as many approaches as there are people. I'd invite you to give it a try, to try and be creative, and to see how you can tell your ideas through an image in this way. And let me know if you try it. If you try it and you would like to share with me your result, I'd be more than happy to receive it in my email. And if you have any questions, please feel free to write me a comment. I know that this video, it was more like a breakdown of the collage, and I would like to see whether you would need more explanation about certain elements that I'm describing, in which case I could make more detailed tutorials in the future. If you like this, please feel free to give me a like, and if you would be interested to see what's next for the channel, please consider subscribing, as it would notify you in the case that I would create new videos where I'm talking about processes of architectural presentation and graphics for architects. Make sure to stay tuned and let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Have a very good day, and I hope that these tips and parts of my process can be helpful for your architectural presentations. Thank you.